It began on an unremarkable Thursday morning. I was standing on the front porch, cradling a mug of coffee, slippers still on my feet, watching the sun rise over the neatly manicured lawns of Willowstone Heights. That's when it happened. A man wearing an HOA-issued vest, complete with a makeshift badge and mirrored sunglasses, stepped onto our driveway, unholstered a taser, and fired it directly at my wife. Yes, my wife. He clearly had no idea who he was dealing with. What he didn't know was that she used to lead a covert recon unit for Joint Special Operations Command. What he couldn't see were the red dots that instantly lit up his chest, courtesy of her old team, quietly deployed and positioned throughout the neighborhood. Their scopes were dialed in and steady. Her name is Arden Calloway. And the reason she didn't flinch wasn't because she underestimated the danger. She saw it coming weeks ago and chose to let it unfold. She knew these types, mall cop fantasists playing war, bloated on ego and a false sense of power. She didn't even blink. I did, though. I dropped my coffee. 1 second we were talking about how we might not have enough charcoal for the Saturday cookout, and the next, she was flat on her back in the driveway, the HOA officer screaming into a walkie-talkie like he was orchestrating a raid on a terrorist compound. We'd moved to Willowstone Heights 6 months earlier, lured in by brochures promising peace, family values, and tight-knit community vibes. What they didn't mention was the HOA's iron-fisted rulebook and the dystopian fantasy land that awaited us. Identical beige homes lined every street, grass trimmed to military perfection, driveways pressure-washed weekly. A trash bin placed even a few inches too early on the curb could bring down a fine worthy of a felony. Arden found it all hilarious at first. The HOA's rulebook was thicker than her combat regulations manual from Afghanistan. She humored the whole thing for the sake of our daughter, good schools, and a quiet neighborhood free of midnight bass drops from someone's basement rave. But things started unraveling with her matte black Jeep, an unassuming military surplus vehicle that she'd driven across war zones and deserts. One morning, she parked it slightly over the curb, barely nudging a patch of communal grass. The next day, we received a notice that looked like it came straight out of a classified intelligence report. Language like infringement severity and vehicular threat profile. I laughed. Arden didn't. She scanned the letter, then filed it neatly in a manila folder labeled Willowstone Paranoia. The president of the HOA, a brittle woman named Beverly Draxler, yes, that's her real name, ran the community like a suburban warlord. Always with a pastel cardigan slung over her shoulders, a clipboard glued to her hand, and a permanent frown that seemed especially reserved for Arden. She gives off militant vibes, Beverly once said during a meeting, loud enough for the entire street to hear. Arden just grinned, adjusted the torque on her Jeep's suspension, and said, "Cool story." That grin earned us weekly inspections, increasing fines, and an HOA citation for combat vehicle presence. But things didn't get truly bizarre until the HOA created their own Community Tactical Oversight Division. That's not a joke. That was the name. They printed it on black polos. 5 guys, none of them under the age of 45, none of them under 200 pounds, started patrolling the streets in camo pants, with oversized flashlights, earpieces, pepper spray canisters, and laminated ID cards that read Code Enforcer and Stability Officer. One of them, I swear to God, practiced baton routines in the cul-de-sac every morning as if he was auditioning for a dystopian dance squad. Arden would observe them silently with the same look she used to give foreign agents during intel debriefs. Calm, patient, calculating. She began taking longer walks, asked subtle questions, installed a few discreet cables in the attic. I once asked what she was doing. She shrugged and said, "Watching. They're not ready yet. When Arden watches, you don't interrupt." Meanwhile, the enforcers got bolder. They placed cameras on stop signs, issued fines for kids drawing chalk on the sidewalk. They fined Mrs. Hargrove, a 76-year-old widow, for a garden gnome flipping the bird. They listed it as offensive symbolic aggression. One evening, I caught one of them peering into our window. Arden didn't panic. She simply stepped outside, looked him dead in the eye, and said, "You want to test your pepper spray on someone who's been tear-gassed in 3 continents before breakfast?" He backed off like his boots were on fire. Then came the 4th of July barbecue. Burgers, beers, good conversation. Arden parked the Jeep front and center, directly in front of the Willowstone sign. Like clockwork, the tactical team showed up. One had a GoPro on his vest. Another began reading citations like he was conducting a military tribunal. Arden leaned against her Jeep, arms crossed. When they said she was in violation of the Neighborhood Aesthetic Stability Clause, she said calmly, "You're welcome to try." That's when one of them pulled the taser. Fired. She dropped. I froze. Then, laser dots bloomed on every inch of the enforcement team's bodies. Her former teammates, hidden in hedges, rooftops, behind garage doors, were locked in. The guy with the taser suddenly looked like a wet rag. Arden opened one eye and said, "Amateur," then stood up and dusted herself off. She documented everything. Every violation. Every illegal surveillance camera. Every fake badge. The HOA tried to retaliate. New rules banning military-style vehicles, aesthetics, even patriotic bumper stickers. They renamed the Oversight Group to Neighborhood Stability Unit. Arden just laughed and added their notice to a now color-coded binder. She didn't argue. She just gathered more evidence. Neighbors started coming forward with their own horror stories. Fines for non-regulation wind chime tones, mandatory tarp inspections, inappropriate garden flags. She listened, compiled. Her team helped too. No weapons, just surveillance. Legal cameras, witnesses, sworn affidavits. The HOA thugs escalated, drones flying over backyards, tape measures up against walls, unannounced safety checks. Arden's archive grew. The final straw came over sidewalk chalk. Local kids had drawn rainbows and smiley faces on the pavement. Beverly issued $150 fines to their families, citing unauthorized street messaging. The next HOA meeting was flooded with furious parents. Arden sat silently in the back, binder in hand. The next morning, another citation showed up. Presence of warlike aesthetic. Arden grinned. "It's time," she said. That evening, another barbecue. She parked the Jeep again under the HOA flagpole. When the same officer approached, she stood in front of the vehicle. "You'll have to go through me," she said. He pulled the taser. Again, she dropped. This time, it was theater. Red dots lit the air. Her old team stepped out of the shadows, calm and composed. Arden peeled the taser prongs off and stood up. A folder was handed to her. "To the community of Willowstone," she announced. "You've all been watched, but not by who you think." A man in a blue suit stepped forward. "Special Agent Keating, Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division. We've been monitoring Willowstone since March. Today, you gave us everything we needed." The taser officer was cuffed. Another began to object. Agent Keating cut him off. "Impersonating law enforcement is a federal offense." Beverly Draxler arrived, flanked by board members. Keating turned. "You authorized this unit. You are responsible." "It's private property," she said, smirking. "Your charter expired 18 months ago. You've levied over $120,000 in illegal fines. This isn't private. This is criminal." She paled. Arden handed over emails, receipts, recordings, proof of fraud, extortion, abuse. "You're under investigation for conspiracy, harassment, and RICO violations," Keating said. Beverly was escorted away, pastel cardigan and all. By dusk, Willowstone Heights was silent. Neighbors whispered, some cried. Jim, the retired mechanic across the street, hugged Arden. Said he thought he'd have to sell his '67 Mustang to pay off HOA fines. A week later, the HOA was dissolved. All fines were nullified. The task force disbanded. Arden erased her files, scrubbed the war room, and went jogging the next day like it was just another Tuesday. At the next emergency meeting, someone nominated her for president of the new HOA. She accepted. Her first act, shredding the old rulebook. Her second, banning all fines, citations, and any use of vests. "We will lead with transparency, not tyranny," she said. "Respect, not fear." As we left, she turned to the crowd. "Oh, and if anyone finds a clipboard labeled Neighborhood Stability Unit, toss it in the fire pit." Laughter erupted. Genuine. Unburdened. Arden Calloway wasn't just my wife. She was the storm beneath the stillness. The quiet force that undid oppression not with rage, but with precision. When they came to break her spirit, she didn't flinch. She dismantled their entire empire. And that's how power, when abused, plants the seed of its own destruction. True strength doesn't need a uniform. It needs only patience, truth, and a spine that doesn't bend.